Welcome back to Judge Judy Movie Analysis 2025, where razor-sharp justice intersects with human tragedy. Are you ready to witness everyday stories full of drama, where the truth is exposed under the spotlight of justice, and the price paid is not only money, but also dignity and emotional growth? Today, we'll dissect Part 3 of Episode 13,650, Best Amazing Cases Season 205, a compilation of astonishing lawsuits where small personal conflicts spiral into serious legal disputes. I invite you to step into this deep dive of analysis. Part 1. Post-divorce tragedy, jealousy, and an arrest warrant for stalking. Case 234, Sperry v. Shively. The opening act is Case No. 234, Sperry v. Shively. Immediately, the atmosphere in the courtroom turns tense. The plaintiff is Elizabeth Sperry, and the defendant is Wendy Shively. Judge Judy begins by confirming a crucial detail. She asks Elizabeth Sperry whether the defendant is currently the girlfriend of her ex-husband. Elizabeth confirms that this is true. To heighten the drama even more, her ex-husband, the man at the center of this emotional catastrophe, is also present in court. This is not just a lawsuit between two women. It is a three-way confrontation, a bitter love triangle between past and present. Elizabeth provides background. She was married for 10 years and has 3 children. But the key point, the detail that shifts the entire power dynamic, is that it is her ex-husband, not her, who has primary custody of the children. This immediately makes me wonder why, because courts typically tend to favor the mother. Elizabeth explains that this arrangement has been in place since they separated. She admits she was the one who left the marriage 4 years earlier. Now, she only gets to see her children on Mondays and Tuesdays after school, and every other weekend, a tight schedule made more complicated by the fact that she lives 54 miles away from her ex-husband. 54 miles, a significant physical distance, a kind of self-imposed exile, almost as if she herself created a barrier between her and her children. She now lives with her new husband, whom she has been married to for 9 months. The core of the lawsuit is Elizabeth's allegation that Wendy Shively caused her to be wrongfully arrested for stalking. Wendy's defense, predictably, is that she was genuinely concerned for her safety and believed Elizabeth's behavior justified calling the police. Judge Judy turns her attention to Wendy, asking her to explain what led her to file the complaint. Wendy's testimony begins with the incident on May 19th. She describes this as her first contact with Elizabeth, though not direct. She claims she noticed Elizabeth following them. Wendy paints a picture of a peaceful domestic scene. She and Elizabeth's ex-husband Jeff, as we later learn, were outside raking leaves after a neighbor cut down a tree, making the corner of the street easier to see. As they were loading leaves onto a truck to take to the dump, she claims Elizabeth kept driving past repeatedly. Wendy deliberately emphasizes that it was a Thursday, a day on which Elizabeth did not have scheduled visitation with the children. This detail is clearly inserted to imply that Elizabeth had no legitimate reason to be there other than to follow or threaten them. Then it's Elizabeth's turn to counter the story of May 19th. Her account is a series of mundane errands, in sharp contrast to the obsessive stalking behavior described by Wendy. Elizabeth says she left home at 10 a.m. for a doctor's appointment at a clinic she had been going to for 10 years. She arrived at 11:10, saw the doctor, then went to pick up her medication. After that, she drove down to main roads in that neighborhood, a neighborhood she describes as large, with major roads that people commonly use as shortcuts. Her destination, she insists, was a Wendy's at the back of the neighborhood, where she planned to buy a grilled chicken sandwich before heading to work, because at that time she was working in sales in that area. When Judge Judy bluntly asks whether she drove past their house on May 19th, Elizabeth initially says no, but then seems flustered when someone interjects that yes, she did. She quickly clarifies her earlier no. This is a weak moment in her testimony, an awkward stumble that makes me frown. She explains that when she got to the back of the neighborhood, she was stopped at a red light and only then noticed a maroon van without windows in front of her. She recognized the license plate and thought, "Oh no, I'm right behind Jeff." She emphasizes that she couldn't even see inside the van. Judge Judy, with her usual sharpness, cuts away the excess detail to get to the heart of the matter. Despite living an hour away, Elizabeth was indeed in the vicinity of their home on May 19th. Immediately, Wendy interjects, insisting that Elizabeth drove past their house 6 times before ending up behind their vehicle. This becomes a classic she said situation. My own view is that Elizabeth's story about the doctor and the Wendy's sandwich is plausible, almost too plausible. It's exactly the kind of alibi that can be easily constructed. But Wendy's claim of 6 times also sounds like the emotional exaggeration of someone who feels threatened. The story doesn't end there. Wendy moves on to the second incident, on June 7th, at a tanning salon. Wendy explains that she had taken Elizabeth's 11-year-old daughter, Allison, to her salon not for UV tanning, but for a spray tan to cover scars on the girl's legs and help her feel more confident. It sounds like a kind act, but the legal issue centers on consent. Wendy admits she never asked Beth Elizabeth's nickname for permission, but had Jeff's permission instead. According to Wendy, Elizabeth then came to the tanning salon and made a scene. The next time Wendy returned to the salon, the employees told her what had happened. Wendy says she felt awful, as if she had overstepped a boundary. She then proactively called Elizabeth, saying they needed to talk, that she meant no harm and just wanted to help Allison. She even suggested they could do it together. They met in a parking lot, and Wendy gave Elizabeth her cell phone number. Wendy claims her intentions were noble, because Elizabeth and Jeff couldn't get along. Wendy thought maybe she could act as a mediator to prevent them from fighting in front of the children, since she cared about them. But, according to Wendy, this kindness backfired. She alleges that Elizabeth began abusing this line of communication. At first, the calls were about small issues related to the children that was fine. But then, they turned into vicious rants about Jeff, how horrible he was, how he would beat Wendy over the next 2 years, that he started off charming, but was actually a woman beater. Wendy says she no longer wanted to hear such things and asked Elizabeth to stop calling her. Now we hear Elizabeth's version of the tanning salon incident. She says that the weekend before June 7th, her daughter casually mentioned going tanning with Wendy. Elizabeth reacted with a no, and understood that her daughter was self-conscious about her scars. She insists she wasn't upset about the appointment itself. That wasn't the issue, but she was curious about who had signed the consent forms. So she went to the tanning salon. When Judge Judy asks why, Elizabeth repeats that she just wanted to know who signed. To me, this is a critical point. If you truly don't mind, why drive there personally to investigate? She continues. She saw Wendy's signature on the form and told the employee that Wendy wasn't a parent or legal guardian and shouldn't have signed. Then Elizabeth signed the forms herself and filled them out for both of her daughters. She tries to salvage her image, saying she wasn't opposed to Wendy, that she thought it was great that the children's father had finally found someone new after 3.5 years, and that the children spoke well of Wendy. She insists she was happy they had someone fun to spend time with. Judge Judy sees through this facade. She tells Elizabeth that if she truly was that happy and generous, she wouldn't have been so curious that she had to make a special trip to the salon just to see who signed the consent form. Judge Judy logically points out that since the father has custody, he can absolutely consent, and he can authorize someone else like Wendy to sign on his behalf. Judge Judy dismisses Elizabeth's flowery explanations. She says Elizabeth's act of going there and saying, "No, I'm going to sign the consent," is unreasonable. Elizabeth attempts to defend herself, saying that as a parent, she only wanted to avoid potential problems later, but she simultaneously admits that it was silly. Judge Judy agrees. Yes, it was. Elizabeth adds that she only did it on her way to pick up the kids. Judge Judy doesn't buy it. She tells her bluntly, "You were agitated." Next, the ex-husband, whom I'll call Mr. Corey based on later parts, is called to the stand to clarify custody issues. He confirms that Elizabeth agreed to give him primary custody when they divorced because he was the only one living in the school district. At that time, she lived 3 miles away, and they didn't want the children to have to change schools. They agreed he would have primary custody for school registration purposes. But later, Elizabeth moved an hour away, and she never petitioned the court to modify custody so the children could live with her. When Judge Judy asks whether Elizabeth ever tried to change the custody arrangement, he says she tried indirectly. He starts to talk about an incident before Father's Day. But Judge Judy stops him and tells him to let Wendy explain. Wendy continues her testimony with the events before Father's Day. She claims Elizabeth appeared at her Wendy's apartment. Elizabeth had called and said that she had just dropped off the kids. Wendy emphasizes that she never gave Elizabeth her address. Judge Judy immediately asks Elizabeth how she got the address. Elizabeth denies having it, claiming she only knew that Wendy lived in an apartment complex behind the neighborhood. How did she know that? My kids talked to me, she says. They told her that Wendy lived where their dad used to live, and when she asked where that was, they said the apartments. This is a deeply troubling detail to me. Using one's own children even unintentionally to gather information about the ex's new partner crosses a line. Elizabeth says that when Wendy called and said she would come over to bring something, Wendy had told her to meet her. Wendy says she did not want Elizabeth inside her apartment because she was alone, so she asked Elizabeth to meet her in front of the rental office, a public place. And this is where the bomb drops. Wendy claims Elizabeth brought a document that would allegedly change the custody arrangement to a 50-50 split. Wendy says Elizabeth wanted her to give this document to Jeff and convince him to sign it. Elizabeth denies this interpretation. She produces a copy of the document and claims she wasn't trying to change everything. The only thing she wanted, she says, was that starting from Father's Day weekend, which happened to fall on her scheduled weekend, he could have the kids that weekend and they would alternate from then on. My analysis: both can be partially right. The document might technically be about Father's Day, but Elizabeth's act of giving it to the new girlfriend instead of directly to her ex-husband is manipulative. She was using Wendy as a pawn, or trying to drive a wedge between them. Judge Judy then turns to a sensitive issue: child support. She asks about the support order. There is an order from May 2003, $473 a month. Judge Judy asks Elizabeth if she is paying that. Elizabeth replies, "I don't pay him, he pays me." She explains that when they first separated and still had 50-50 custody, he earned 3 times her income. Judge Judy cuts that off. She wants to know what's happening now. Elizabeth admits that currently there is no order requiring her to pay him anything, even though he is the custodial parent. She tries to justify that she still has the kids half the week, which Judge Judy immediately rejects as untrue, that she pays their health insurance, and that he still earns 3 times as much as she does. Judge Judy responds, "There should have been a modification." Mr. Corey agrees. "I know there should have been. The absence of a support order requiring Elizabeth to pay her higher-earning custodial ex is a glaring financial imbalance. It suggests that Mr. Corey is simply too tired of legal battles to pursue what he is legally entitled to." Judge Judy then examines the most recent court order on visitation. The October 2004 order simply modifies a prior order to allow overnight visitation on alternating weekends. But the document Elizabeth gave Wendy, Judge Judy notes, contains 7 provisions, including holidays and most of the summer. It would be a major change from the current order. Mr. Corey takes the stand again to clarify. He says the original arrangement was 50-50, but he added a clause that if Elizabeth moved more than 30 miles away, everything would change. He knew she would move to live with her boyfriend, whom she had been involved with even while still living in my house. When she moved without telling him, he went back to court. The court ruled that the children couldn't live that far away and granted him full-time custody. He now paints a very different picture of Elizabeth's visitation. He says she picks up the kids, drives them aimlessly around, and drops them off at 7 p.m. He calls it a total failure, that the kids are dropped somewhere else and she doesn't actually spend meaningful time with them. He says it's a serious problem because the children 12, 11, and 7 are at the age where they think they're 20. Their problem with him is that he has rules, while at their mother's, they are unsupervised. Then Mr. Corey delivers a very emotional statement. He says, "Wendy is the best thing that ever happened to me and my daughters, and he thinks Elizabeth is simply jealous. He says all he wants is to be left alone, that he has never sought child support from her, but he can't get any peace." Judge Judy responds with a powerful life lesson about divorce. She tells him he will never be left alone because he chose Elizabeth to be the mother of his children, and she will always be their mother. He cannot be punished for life for being stupid at 24, but the children also should not be punished. They need to feel loved by both parents. She tells Elizabeth that she made her choice 4 years earlier when she left, and she cannot have her choice, her heart, and her children all at once. Judge Judy says Elizabeth is smart enough to leave him alone and will continue fighting him over the children until they grow up. After that life lecture, Judge Judy returns to the lawsuit itself. The stalking claim. Wendy lists the incidents, the tanning salon, the car following episode. She says she was scared all along because Elizabeth did not act like a stable and rational person. For example, trying to sneak through that backdoor custody agreement. Elizabeth showed up with the document but didn't hand it over. Instead, she asked for Wendy's email, saying the printout was too faint to read. Wendy believes it was just another tactic to obtain more contact information, but she gave the email anyway, hoping it would stop the phone rants. The last straw, according to Wendy, was on Father's Day evening at a McDonald's, where she was picking up the children. She was afraid the ex-spouses would argue because it was a bad day. When she picked up the kids, she claims Elizabeth ran straight to her car, shouting, "Give me Taylor's cell phone." It turns out their daughter had a mobile phone that her father had confiscated because she was using it to lie and deceive him. He had warned Elizabeth, who gave the phone, that he would take it away if he saw it again. Wendy accuses Elizabeth of telling their daughter to sneak it into the house in her backpack with the ringer off so her father wouldn't know. At McDonald's, Wendy says Elizabeth came directly at her. Wendy rolled up her window and drove off, terrified. That's what led her to call the police. Finally, Elizabeth gives her version. She says it's all fabrication. She confirms having met Wendy on June 7th, that Wendy had called and wanted to talk so there would be no problems. They talked for 20 minutes. Wendy gave her cell number. Everything was cordial. But later, while she was at the pool with the kids, Mr. Corey left a very harsh voicemail saying that Wendy saw right through her. On the cell phone issue, Elizabeth says she gave her daughter that phone back in October. That evening, she received a nasty email from Mr. Corey saying he didn't want her coming to the house anymore and that they would meet at McDonald's for child exchanges. She says she went to McDonald's at 6 p.m. Wendy was there to pick up the kids. Elizabeth says she got out of her car with her daughter, walked to Wendy's car, and calmly asked. She insists she was not upset and that 3 witnesses could confirm this, whether Wendy had the cell phone. She had left a message on Friday saying she wanted the phone back. Wendy said no. Elizabeth asked if she could go get it, and Wendy answered no, saying Jeff had said he'd return it when they went to court. Elizabeth asked, "What does my cell phone have to do with assault?" Wendy replied, "I don't know. Don't put me in the middle." Elizabeth said fine, turned around, and went back to her car. Here comes another crucial detail. Elizabeth admits that she then drove to the police station. She told the officers that he missed her. Corey was withholding her property and that she had endured this abuse for 4 years, and she wanted her phone back. Judge Judy asks where the children were while she went to the police station. Elizabeth confirms they had just left with Wendy. She dropped them off and then went to the station. She insists she went because she wanted her property returned and that he had no right to confiscate it. Judge Judy sums up the problem. You have no property. You gave that phone to your daughter. It was a gift. It is no longer your property. Her ruling is a master class in logic. Judge Judy says she cannot know who is telling the truth about the phone calls or the repeated driving by. There is no objective evidence of these things, but there are 2 objective actions Elizabeth took that the judge can rely on, 2 actions that show she was more upset than she claims. She went to the tanning salon for no clear reason other than curiosity. As Judge Judy points out, the father with custody can consent, and can delegate that consent. Elizabeth seeing Wendy's signature and insisting no, "I'm the mother, I'll sign instead," is an act driven by anger and feeling replaced. After dropping off the children, she went to the police station over a cell phone, a phone she knew had been confiscated because her daughter had misbehaved. Based on those 2 irrational and emotionally charged actions, Judge Judy concludes that Wendy likely had reasonable grounds to file a complaint. She dismisses Elizabeth Sperry's lawsuit for wrongful arrest. Part 2. Intimate Friends, Alcohol, and a Destroyed Car. Case 203, Castilla v. Gonzalez. The second case, Case No. 203, Castilla v. Gonzalez, takes us into a completely different kind of mess. The plaintiff, Rebecca Castilla, is suing Manuel Gonzalez, whom she describes as her friend. She alleges that he somehow took her car and damaged it in 3 separate incidents in a single night. Manuel's defense is even more shocking. He claims she was so drunk that she doesn't remember what happened, that she was the one driving, and that she herself caused the damage. Judge Judy immediately probes the nature of their relationship. "Just friends." Rebecca hesitates. Yeah, I guess you could say that." Judge Judy, unsatisfied. "I don't want to guess. Were you intimate?" Rebecca admits. Yes, they had been intimate a few times. Judge Judy notes the difference. Bird, Her bailiff is her friend, and they have never been intimate. The age gap is then revealed, clarifying everything. Rebecca is 35. Manuel is just 21. Judge Judy sarcastically calls them intimate friends, a whole new category of friendship. Rebecca begins recounting the fateful night of June 5th. She says she was at home when Manuel called, asking her to give him and his friend Mike a ride home. She agreed, but when she arrived at the restaurant, he was there with 3 other men, eating and drinking. She ordered a margarita and stayed for about an hour and a half. She insists she only had 1 drink. From there, instead of going home, the group decided to go to a pool hall. They stayed for half an hour. She played pool with another man. Then they wanted to go somewhere else, and she, clearly acting as the driver by now, drove them to another bar. Manuel jumps in. He says they called her because they needed a driver. They had already been drinking. He says the original plan was to go home, but when Rebecca arrived, she started drinking with them and was the one who agreed to go elsewhere. Rebecca's story continues. After the last bar, she dropped one of Manuel's friends off at his car. Then she drove to a nearby gas station. She got out, left the keys in the ignition, and went inside to pay for the gas at the pump where she was parked. When she came back out, her car was gone. She says she panicked and thought it was a joke. She waited 15 to 20 minutes and eventually called 911 to report the car stolen. At that very moment, she looked up and saw Manuel driving her car back, with his friend still inside. She yelled at him. He refused to get out of the driver's seat and said he would drive himself and his friend home. Here comes the first of her many terrible decisions, she says. Fine. She pumped gas into the car and then got into the passenger seat. He drove off, dropping the friend off first. Manuel was driving so recklessly, she says, that the friend jumped out of the car before it had even fully stopped. The friend shouted through the window, "That's what you get for hanging out with a 21-year-old. I have to agree. That comment is painfully accurate." Then Manuel sped up again, with Rebecca still in the car. She says she screamed for him to stop, but he didn't. He drove down a construction road lined with concrete barriers and cones. He drove wildly, hitting cones. She counted 8. When she saw him heading toward a concrete divider, she claims she had to grab the steering wheel to avoid a serious crash. He still didn't stop. He drove straight home. And here comes bad decision number 2. When they arrived at his house, she went inside with him. Her reason: she wanted to resolve the situation, get some kind of written acknowledgement. Judge Judy immediately detects the lie. "Look at me," she orders. "I can tell when someone isn't giving me a straight story." Rebecca repeats that she wanted to handle the situation, the damage to her car. She admits she hadn't yet seen the actual damage, but she knew he had hit the cones. Inside the house, he ignored her, walked into a back room to talk to his friend Mike, then came back out and told her to wait for him in her car outside. Bad decision number 3. She did as he said. She went out and sat in her car. Then she saw Manuel and Mike get into Mike's car and drive away. Bad decision number 4. She followed them. She chased them across town to an apartment complex, down a dead-end road. She says she was trying to find her cell phone, but couldn't. Maybe it was on the floor, but she denies being drunk. At the dead end, they stopped. Mike was in his car. Rebecca was in hers. Manuel, she says, got out of Mike's car, walked to her car, and told her to slide over so they could talk. Bad decision number 5, the most unbelievable one. She did it. Judge Judy even asks how, given that there were 2 separate front seats with a console in between. Rebecca claims she climbed over somehow, then tries to justify herself by saying, "I had no choice. He practically sat on my lap." Judge Judy exposes the absurdity. You're 35 years old. You had a choice. The moment he got home, you should have called 911 and reported the damage. You went into his house to get paperwork. He didn't give you anything that was your sign. He would never take responsibility. But instead of leaving, she let him get behind the wheel again. After he got in, he told her he had no reason to bow and scrape to her like a princess, that he didn't have a valid license because he wasn't allowed to drive. Then he put the car in reverse and slammed it into a wall. Now it's Manuel's turn, the 21-year-old. He says she asked him to drive after they left the bar because she had been drinking. He says he refused because he already had a prior DUI and didn't want another. He insists nobody stole her car at the gas station. Then comes the most shocking part of his testimony. He says that when they got back to his house, they were there for 2 hours. Doing what? Being intimate friends. Judge Judy quips, "You learn fast." After 2 hours of intimacy, He says he told her to leave because Mike's girlfriend had arrived. He told her he didn't want to be with her and wanted nothing to do with her. She got mad and left. They left. She followed them. When they got to the apartment complex, he says he got out to ask why she was following him. At that exact moment, he claims, Rebecca, in a rage, reversed her own car into the wall boom. When he ran over to yell at her, she suddenly lurched forward and crashed the front of her car into one of the big posts. It's a tangled mess of conflicting stories. But Rebecca has an ace up her sleeve. A recording. She says it's a voicemail he left her the next day, where he admits taking her car without her in it. Judge Judy wants to hear it. They play the tape. A voice says, "Hey, when I left you yesterday, when you were at the bank, your car was fine. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do anything to your car. I didn't hit anything. And after I took off without you and came back, your car was still fine. I didn't hit anything. So I don't know why you're mad at me." Manuel immediately denies it's his voice, but Judge Judy catches him brilliantly. If Rebecca were going to fake a tape, she would have faked a full confession. "I'm sorry. I wrecked your car. I'll pay for everything." She would not have faked a message where the speaker merely admits taking the car without her but denies causing damage. The logic is airtight. That is Manuel's voice, and he does admit to the core act, taking her car without permission. He is a liar, yet the verdict stuns Rebecca. Her case is dismissed. Judge Judy explains, although Manuel is clearly a liar and his conduct is morally repugnant, she does not believe he is legally responsible for the damage. She doesn't believe Rebecca's account. She believes Rebecca was angry enough to possibly damage the car herself or, more importantly, that she consented to letting him drive. A 35-year-old woman who made 5 reckless choices in one night, who chased a 21-year-old across town, who climbed over the console to give him the driver's seat after he had nearly gotten them both killed. Judge Judy concludes that Rebecca put herself in that position. She was using him as a playmate, and he was using her as a driver. In that chaos of bad decisions and mismatched maturity, the law cannot crown a clear victim. Part 3. A broken family, wounded pride, and the fight over an old car. Case 292. McClure v. McClure. The final case, Case No. 292. McClure v. McClure, is the most emotionally painful family tragedy. There are not one but 2 plaintiffs, Brian McClure, the father, and his 16-year-old son, Camden McClure. The defendant is Gay McClure, Brian's ex-wife and Camden's mother. This set-up father and son suing the mother already speaks volumes about the deep fractures in this family. They are suing over 3 things: child support overpayment, car parts, and money withdrawn from a savings account. Judge Judy clarifies the background. Brian and Gay have been divorced for about a year and a half. Initially, their son Camden lived with his mother for around 2 years. But recently, at the end of July, Camden moved in with his father. Judge Judy first deals with the father's claim, child support. Brian is under a court order to pay $677 a month in child support to Gay. He argues that he overpaid for the month in which Camden had already moved in with him, so the payment for that month was not owed. Judge Judy asks Gay whether she disputes that he overpaid that $677. Gay admits, "No, Your Honor." Then what's the problem? Why not return it? Gay begins a weak justification, saying that Brian has repeatedly told her she must spend every single cent of support on Camden. Judge Judy cuts her off. If she knew it was an overpayment, she was wrong to keep it. Brian adds that she tried to pay him back $10 or $20 a week, which he found unacceptable. Judge Judy completely agrees. She tells Gay that if the situation were reversed, she would never tolerate receiving her child support in tiny $20 strips. Brian had to support the child for that month. Gay is obligated to return the full overpaid amount. On this point, Judge Judy rules immediately, judgment for Brian, but in the corrected amount of $624, which Gay owes him. Next, she turns to the young plaintiff, Camden. She asks why he moved in with his father. The 16-year-old cautiously answers that living with his mother wasn't very good. Judge Judy presses, "You lived with your mother for 16 years and suddenly, it's no good." Camden tries to soften it, saying he wanted to spend more time with his father, and when he told his mother that, their relationship deteriorated. Judge Judy asks Gay about this. Gay, clearly hurt, says she has a problem with that version. She says that just months earlier, they had discussed the possibility of Camden living with Brian, and Camden had insisted He didn't want that under any circumstances. He had even made her promise that if Brian ever went to court for custody, she would not agree. Drawing on her long experience with family court, Judge Judy delivers a sharp psychological insight. Teenagers change their minds. The correct response from Gay, she says, should have been, "You want to live with your father. Great, I'm free." Judge Judy says she understands that Gay feels hurt, that's natural, but wants her to see the upside. For the first time, she is free. Camden's decision doesn't reflect her parenting. It's just a 16-year-old mind drifting with the wines, wanting to buddy up and connect with his father. Now we come to Camden's claims. First, the car. Camden is suing for the cost of car parts he put into a vehicle he believes is his. Judge Judy clarifies, the car, an '86 Pontiac Trans Am, was awarded to Gay in the divorce decree. Gay got to older cars, an '87 Buick and this '86 Trans Am. Brian got another '86 Trans Am and a much newer '93 Chevy truck. Brian tries to argue that everyone in the family understood that the car would be Camden's when he turned 16. Judge Judy sharply rebukes him. She says she is annoyed he even allowed Camden to sue over this. He should have told his son, "Camden, you're wrong. That's your mother's car. I got one car. Your mother got one car. That's her car. If I want you to have a car, I'll give you one of mine." Camden argues that he made it run, that he worked on it and installed parts. He and his father did the repairs. Judge Judy doesn't care. It's not his car, it's his mother's. She allowed him to drive it. He has no legal standing to sue her over it. This part of the lawsuit is dismissed. Finally, the savings account. Camden sues for $528 that he says his mother took. He claims he earned that money working for his grandfather and selling at flea markets. The account was closed in August 2003, when he was still living with his mother. Day admits closing the account. Her explanation is that they lived far from town. When Camden needed money for church group or other activities and didn't give advance notice, she didn't have cash on hand. Driving into town to withdraw from his account was inconvenient. Judge Judy asks the killer question, "Why didn't you pay for those things yourself?" Day says she paid for a lot of things. Judge Judy fires back, "You should have paid for everything." Day then reveals a sad fact. She doesn't work and lives on public assistance. Judge Judy asks Camden whether his mother would say, "We're going to your bank and taking money out when he needed something." Camden says, "No, Your Honor." Day tells a different story. She claims Camden suggested it himself, that he said, "Mom, why don't you close the account and keep the money at home so you don't have to keep driving back and forth when I need money?" Camden firmly denies ever having said that. Judge Judy looks at the documents. They show the account opened with $300, with only $227 deposited afterward. Camden explains that the initial $300 was also money he had earned from when they lived in another city. Judge Judy's ruling here is clear. Judgment for Camden for $528. Her legal reasoning is crucial. It was Camden's money. Day was merely the custodian. She could not withdraw and spend it as she pleased. Even if she spent it on him, she would still need to show the court exactly how it was spent. Since she cannot do that and has admitted withdrawing the money, she must pay it back. In closing, Judge Judy offers final advice to the family. She tells Camden that choosing to live with his father does not mean he no longer has a mother. She tells Gay that this is her chance. Gay, she says, should be the second happiest person in the room because she just gained some freedom. Judge Judy urges her to use that freedom to get back on her feet, find a job, and start taking care of herself. It's a reminder that adult responsibility isn't just about raising children, it is also about stabilizing one's own life. Part 4. Personal predictions and inferences about the aftermath. After witnessing the emotional tragedies and legal failures in this episode, I can't help speculating about the long-term consequences for these people. For Elizabeth Sperry and Wendy Shively, this battle is far from over. Elizabeth lost the case, but I don't believe that will stop her. The fact that her lawsuit was defeated based onto irrational actions going to the tanning salon and the police station will only teach her to become more subtle in her tactics. She will avoid such overtly impulsive moves. Instead, I predict she intensify indirect efforts to regain leverage in the custody battle, perhaps by manipulating the children to speak ill of Wendy and their father. As for Wendy, she has won this round, but she has turned herself into the primary target. By stepping into the conflict, taking documents, answering calls, she has placed herself firmly in the middle. I predict that the ongoing strain of living with Mr. Corey while constantly dealing with Elizabeth's hostility will erode their relationship, and Mr. Corey, the man who just wants to be left alone, will realize that as long as he remains in this battlefield, peace will never come. For Rebecca Castillo and Manuel Gonzalez, this is an expensive lesson in chasing youth. Rebecca has been publicly humiliated. She has lost not only the money for her car repairs, but also her self-respect. Judge Judy exposed her as a 35-year-old woman desperately seeking attention from a 21-year-old. I predict Rebecca will retreat, perhaps resenting Judge Judy, but deep down knowing the judge was right. She will likely be more cautious with future intimate friends, but the scar of this shame will linger. Manuel, meanwhile, has escaped financial liability, but the trial has revealed him as a liar through the voicemail with the prior DUI. He has learned that he can manipulate older, vulnerable women, but he has also learned that evidence such as recordings is permanent. I suspect he will continue his reckless lifestyle, but he will be more careful not to leave a digital trail. Finally, the McClure family tragedy runs the deepest. Camden won $528, but at the cost of publicly joining his father in a lawsuit against his own mother. Suing over an old car and a childhood savings account is a rift not easily healed. I predict Camden will one day regret this. As he matures, he may realize that $500 was not worth publicly shaming the mother who raised him on welfare. Brian won $624 and won his son, but he did so by encouraging a legal attack on his ex-wife. He has taught his son that lawsuits are a valid way to resolve family conflicts. I suspect that, when Camden turns 17 or 18 and begins to rebel, Brian will discover that being his son's buddy is far harder than criticizing the mother. As for Gay McClure, she lost financially on both claims. She lost her son, lost money, and was publicly criticized for living on public assistance. Judge Judy's harsh words were, ironically, the only constructive thing she received. Get yourself together. I hope this shock becomes the catalyst she needs. I predict that the painful freedom from daily child care responsibilities will force her to face herself. She may eventually find a job, rebuild her life, and perhaps, one day, rebuild her relationship with Camden not based on financial dependence, but on mutual respect. Part 5. Conclusion and Invitation. Through episode 13,650, Best Amazing Cases Season 205, we've explored some of the darkest corners of human emotion: jealousy after divorce, recklessness driven by desire, and the bitterness of a fractured family. Sperry v. Shively shows that in custody battles, there is no limit to irrational behavior, and trying to be the peacemaker often only turns you into the next target. Castillo v. Gonzalez is a cautionary tale about age gaps and desperation. It proves that the court will not protect you from your own bad choices, even if you are the victim of lies. McClure v. McClure is a modern tragedy, where loyalty is split and money becomes the weapon used to resolve emotional wounds. Judge Judy is forced to separate law support payments and custodial accounts from emotion in the car and the feeling of abandonment. The biggest lesson is this: objective truths, a visit to a tanning salon, a voicemail, a bank record will always outweigh emotional self-justification and the stories we tell ourselves. So here's the question. Do you think Judge Judy was too harsh on Rebecca Castillo, who was clearly deceived and used by Manuel Gonzalez? Or was she right in deciding that Rebecca's own choices invalidated her claim? Share your thoughts and analysis in the comments below. And don't forget to follow and subscribe to Judge Judy Movie Analysis 2025 so we can keep exploring deep, life-changing cases together. Thank you for watching.